Music. Long before the rise of human kingdoms in Westeros, the land pulsed with magic and mystery. In the heart of the ancient forests and across the untamed landscapes dwelt the children of the forest. Small, elusive beings possessed of powers far beyond human comprehension. They were intrinsically linked to the natural world, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of the seasons and the whispers of the trees. They lived in harmony with the land, unseen and undisturbed. But the ancient equilibrium was shattered with the arrival of a new presence. 12,000 BC, humans, the first men, crossed the narrow sea from Essos. They stepped onto the shores of Westeros armed with bronze weapons and an unyielding determination. These newcomers were unlike anything the children had ever encountered. They did not seek to coexist. They came to conquer, and conquer they did. The first men swiftly began to fell the ancient forests, clearing the land for their settlements, their farms, and their burgeoning population. The peaceful balance that had endured for centuries was irrevocably broken. The children, deeply connected to the natural world, retaliated. They wielded powerful magic, drawing upon the very essence of the land as their weapon. They summoned storms, commanded the trees, and called upon the creatures of the forest to fight alongside them. The first men were relentless. Their numbers grew, their settlements spread, and their influence began to reshape Westeros in ways that defied imagination. The land itself began to change, scarred by the axes and plows of the invaders. But this was not merely a war of bloodshed. It was a clash of cultures, of beliefs, and of ways of life. The first men brought with them new languages, new traditions, and a worldview that would eventually lay the foundation for the world we now know. They built homes of stone, farmed the land with diligence, and established a social order unlike anything the children had ever conceived. With every battle fought and every forest felled, Westeros edged closer to becoming a land shaped by humans rather than the mystical beings who had once called it home. The ancient ways were fading, replaced by the pragmatic and ambitious spirit of the first men. Yet the saga of the first men was not solely defined by conquest and destruction. The endless fighting took its toll on both sides, leading to a pivotal event that would forever alter the course of Westeros's history, the Pact of the Isle of Faces. In this truce, the first men and the children of the forest agreed to share the land. The forests, once sacred and untouchable, would belong to the children, while the first men could retain the lands they had already claimed. It was a fragile peace, a compromise born of exhaustion and mutual respect. As time unfolded, the first men began to adopt the ways of the children. They embraced the worship of the old gods, the same deities revered by the children through their sacred weirwood trees. This blending of cultures would endure for thousands of years, forging a unique bond between the people of the North and the ancient magic that still lingered in the land. The North became a bastion of the old ways, a place where the whispers of the children could still be heard in the rustling of the leaves. But even as peace settled over Westeros, the legacy of the first men's arrival continued to echo through the ages. Their bloodlines would give rise to the great houses that would come to dominate the continent. Their customs and beliefs would shape the culture of the North, and in the shadows of history, their arrival would mark the awakening of darker forces stirring in the distant lands beyond the Wall. The first men may have brought with them civilization, but they also unwittingly awakened something far more ancient, something that would one day rise again to threaten all of Westeros. The seeds of future conflicts were sown in their arrival, a dormant menace waiting for the opportune moment to unleash its icy wrath. Music. The arrival of the first men had reshaped Westeros, but their conquest was not the only force to leave its indelible mark upon the land. Beneath the icy winds of the north, something far older than humans had begun to stir, and with it came a darkness that would threaten to engulf the world, the Long Night. No one knows precisely when it began, but sometime around 8000 BC, Westeros plunged into an era of cold and darkness unlike anything it had ever witnessed. The sun vanished from the sky, and for an entire generation, the land was gripped by an unrelenting winter. Crops failed, villages starved, and the snow stretched far beyond the north, blanketing nearly the entire continent in a harsh, unforgiving frost. The very air crackled with an unnatural chill. It was during this time that the White Walkers, or the Others as they were called in hushed ancient tales, first emerged from the farthest reaches of the north. They came with death and destruction, marching southward and leaving a trail of frozen corpses in their wake. Armed with weapons of ice, they sought not just to conquer, but to obliterate humanity entirely. Their eyes burned with an icy blue fire, and their presence extinguished all warmth and hope. The phrase, "winter is coming," passed down through generations of House Stark, carries the weight of this cataclysmic event. It was more than just a warning of seasonal cold. It was a stark reminder of the terrible winter that had nearly claimed all of Westeros. And at the heart of it all were the White Walkers, who seemed to thrive in the darkness, unstoppable and unyielding. The phrase became a mantra, a constant reminder of the fragility of life in the face of ancient, unknowable forces. Desperate and on the brink of extinction, the first men who had once fought to conquer this land found themselves facing an enemy beyond their comprehension, but they were not alone in their struggle. In an unprecedented move, the first men joined forces with their former enemies, the Children of the Forest. Together, they forged an alliance to stand against the tide of ice and death that threatened to consume them all. Ancient grudges were set aside in the face of a common enemy, a testament to the resilience of life in the face of utter annihilation. It was the Children of the Forest who discovered the key to fighting the White Walkers, dragonglass. This obsidian material, once merely a curious natural resource, became a powerful weapon capable of killing the otherwise invincible White Walkers. Armed with dragonglass blades and bolstered by the ancient magic of the Children, the first men managed to hold the line, pushing the White Walkers back into the frozen wilderness. They learned to fight as one, blending the brute strength of men with the subtle magic of the Children. But even with their combined strength, it wasn't just brute force that won the day. It was the emergence of legendary heroes, figures like Azor Ahai, a warrior whose tale would be told in different forms across many cultures, who led the charge against the darkness. According to myth, Azor Ahai wielded a sword of fire, Lightbringer, and fought to bring an end to the Long Night. His story, though shrouded in mystery, would echo down through the ages, a symbol of hope in the face of overwhelming evil. Alongside these heroes, the Night's Watch was born. This band of men swore an oath to defend the realms of men from threats beyond the Wall, a brotherhood forged in the fires of this long and bitter struggle. They became the shield against the darkness, the guardians of the realm, forever vigilant against the return of the others. Their oath was a solemn promise, a vow to stand against the encroaching night, no matter the cost. It was their vigilance, along with the sacrifices of many, that finally forced the White Walkers into retreat, ending the long night and bringing light back to Westeros. The sun returned, the snows began to melt, and life slowly returned to the ravaged land. But the memory of the long night would never truly fade. The stories of the White Walkers became legends, their threats seemingly confined to the distant past. Yet as the centuries passed, one truth remained. The White Walkers were not gone. They had only been pushed back, waiting, watching, and biding their time until the day they would return. Their presence lingered in the icy winds, a subtle reminder of the darkness that lay dormant, and so the warning "winter is coming" lingered, passed from one generation to the next, reminding Westeros of a darkness that might one day rise again. The long night had ended, and the White Walkers were forced back into the icy wilderness from which they came, but the people of Westeros knew that the darkness they had faced was not gone for good. The White Walkers, though defeated, remained a looming threat in the distant north, and so the first men and the Children of the Forest, who had once fought together to survive the long night, turned their attention to a new task, building a defense that would stand the test of time. That defense became one of the most iconic and imposing structures ever seen, the Wall. Stretching for hundreds of miles across the northernmost edge of Westeros, the Wall was more than just a barrier of ice and stone. It was a symbol of the vigilance and strength of the people who built it. Standing over 700 feet tall, its sheer size alone made it a marvel of engineering. It was a testament to human ingenuity and the will to survive. But there was more to the Wall than met the eye. This was no ordinary fortification. It was infused with ancient magic, woven into its very foundations to keep out the dangers lurking beyond the north. Spells of protection, warding against the icy touch of the others, were etched into every stone. At the heart of this monumental project was the legendary figure Bran the Builder, known in the annals of history as the founder of House Stark and the builder of Winterfell. Bran's greatest achievement was the creation of the Wall. He was a visionary, a leader, and a master of both construction and magic. Legend has it that Bran didn't work alone. With the help of giants, the First Men, and the Children of the Forest, he combined both physical labor and mystical forces to construct this impenetrable barrier. Giants hauled the massive blocks of ice, while the First Men and the Children used their knowledge of the land and magic to imbue the wall with its protective properties. Some say that Bran's knowledge of magic, learned from the children, was crucial in giving the wall its formidable strength. He understood the ancient powers that flowed through the land and knew how to harness them to create a barrier that could withstand the onslaught of the others. But what makes the wall truly remarkable isn't just its size or the effort it took to build, it's the magic that lies within it. The spells woven into the ice are said to be as old as Westeros itself, designed to protect the realms of men from the White Walkers and other dark forces beyond the wall. This ancient power made the wall not just a physical boundary, but a magical one, capable of holding back creatures that no ordinary structure could withstand. Alongside the wall came the creation of the Night's Watch, a brotherhood of men sworn to guard it. Clad in black, they took an oath to defend the realm from all that lay beyond, even at the cost of their lives. They were a living shield, standing between the living and the threats that still lurked in the frozen wasteland to the north. Their oath was a solemn vow, a promise to stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. The Night's Watch wasn't just an army, it was a brotherhood of outcasts, nobles, and criminals alike, united by their common cause. Men from all walks of life seeking redemption, escape, or simply a purpose found their place on the wall. For the men of the Night's Watch, their life on the wall was one of isolation and hardship. The freezing cold, far from the comforts of the southern kingdoms, they stood vigil, watching for any sign that the ancient enemy might return. Their days were filled with training, patrols, and the endless maintenance of the wall. The Brothers of the Watch, though often forgotten by the rest of Westeros, became legends in their own right, defenders of the realm who gave everything to keep their fellow men safe. They were the unsung heroes, the guardians of the North, forever vigilant against the encroaching darkness. The wall itself became a symbol of the North's strength and resilience, marked the boundary between the known world and the mysterious, dangerous lands beyond. But it was also a reminder, a physical representation of the price Westeros had paid to survive the long night and the ongoing need to protect the realm from threats that could rise again at any moment. Was a constant reminder of the sacrifices made and the dangers that lurked just beyond the icy barrier. For thousands of years, the wall stood tall, its magic and strength unbroken. But like all things in Westeros, its significance wasn't just in the past. The wall's purpose would one day be tested once more as the ancient enemies it was built to defend against stirred again in the far reaches of the north. The people of Westeros may have forgotten the White Walkers, but the wall remembered. And as the winds of winter began to rise once more, so too did the threats beyond the wall, waiting for the moment to return. The ancient enemy was stirring, and the wall would once again be the only thing standing between them and the realms of men. As the wall stood tall in the north, guarding against the ancient threats beyond, another force was taking shape in the southern reaches of Westeros. This time it wasn't forged from stone and magic, but from faith, the faith of the Seven. The dominant religion in Westeros would come to influence the lives of countless people, shaping the politics, culture, and even the very identity of the realm. But its origins lie far across the sea in the land of the Andals. It began with a vision. King Hugor of the Hill, one of the greatest kings of the Andals, is said to have received a revelation from the gods themselves. In his vision, 7 deities appeared before him, each representing a different facet of life and death. These 7 divine aspects, the father, the mother, the maiden, the crone, the warrior, the smith, and the stranger, came to form the foundation of what would become the faith of the Seven. The new religion promised not only spiritual guidance, but also a sense of unity and purpose for the Andals. It offered a structured belief system, a moral code, and a sense of community that resonated with the people. And with that vision, the faith began to spread. When the Andals set their sights on Westeros, they brought more than just steel and fire. They brought their faith. Their invasion, which would sweep across much of the continent, wasn't just a conquest of land, but of belief. As the Andals made their way through the southern kingdoms, they converted many of the first men to the faith of the Seven, replacing the old traditions and beliefs that had long governed the land. The ancient gods of the forest, worshipped by the first men, were slowly pushed aside as the seven gained dominance. The sacred weirwood trees were replaced by septs, and the whispers of the old gods were silenced by the chants of the faithful. The arrival of the faith didn't just change the way people worshipped, it reshaped the very fabric of Westerosi society. With the Andals came new customs, laws, and a structured religious hierarchy that would become deeply entwined with the political landscape. The faith wasn't just a spiritual force, it was a political one. The establishment of the faith militant, a powerful religious order that wielded both sword and scripture, would later play a crucial role in the power struggles that gripped the realm. These warrior priests and knights saw themselves as the protectors of the faith, ready to defend it against any threat, both internal and external. At the heart of the faith's influence was the High Septon, the spiritual leader of the Faith of the Seven. The position of the High Septon carried immense weight, as those who held the title had the power to bless or curse the rule of kings. Over time, the High Septons would become some of the most influential figures in the realm, with their decisions echoing through the halls of power. They wielded considerable political influence, often acting as kingmakers or mediators in times of conflict. The faith and the Iron Throne were often at odds, with each struggling for control over the hearts and minds of the people. The kings sought to control the faith, while the faith sought to influence the kings. This constant tension would shape the political landscape of Westeros for centuries. But the Faith of the Seven wasn't just a tool of political power. It was deeply symbolic, with each of the seven aspects representing a different part of the human experience. The father stood for justice, the mother for nurturing, the maiden for innocence, and the crone for wisdom. The warrior symbolized strength, the smith hard work, and the stranger, the most mysterious of the seven, represented death and the unknown. These aspects touched every corner of life from birth to death and shaped the way people in Westeros saw the world around them. They provided a framework for understanding the complexities of life and offered guidance on how to live a virtuous existence. As the faith took root in the southern regions of Westeros, its influence grew stronger. Great septs were built where the faithful would come to worship, pray, and seek guidance. Weddings, coronations, and even funerals were often conducted under the watchful gaze of the seven, weaving the religion into the very traditions of the realm. The septs became centers of community, places where people could gather to celebrate, mourn, and find solace in their faith. Over time, the Faith of the Seven became more than just a belief system, it became a way of life. It shaped the morals, customs, and social structures of the southern kingdoms, influencing everything from marriage practices to laws and governance. Yet even as the faith spread across Westeros, not all regions embraced it. The north, where the first men had long held sway, the worship of the old gods endured. The weirwood trees and godswoods remained sacred, and the people of the north held fast to the traditions passed down through the generations. They saw the Faith of the Seven as a foreign import, a threat to their ancient ways. This divide between the old gods of the north and the seven of the south would become yet another fault line in the complex history of Westeros, would fuel conflicts, shape alliances, and influence the destinies of countless individuals. And so, as the kingdoms of men rose and fell, the Faith of the Seven remained a constant presence, its influence shaping the rulers who sought power and the people who lived under their rule. Like the wall in the north, the faith was a foundation, one that would withstand the tides of time, but also one that could become a battleground of its own. For while the faith preached unity and peace, its history was filled with strife, rebellion, and the constant struggle for control. The seeds of future conflicts were sown in the clash between the old gods and the new, in the ambition of the High Septons, and in the unwavering faith of the followers of the Seven. For centuries, in the free to them, instead, their way they main under the relate they had their in many they shared the event. It was though man he would be the ancient the history in wonder this moment there are Dennis she for Valyria, but Lord it was only the once dragon rich in the volcanic rock known as dragon glass, a material with its own dark significance in the history of Westeros. The island became the seat of House Targaryen, a fortress from which they could watch over the narrow sea and look toward the mainland. Dragonstone became their sanctuary, a place where they could rebuild their lives and plot their future. Though at the time the Targaryens were just one of many exiled Valyrian families, Their decision to relocate to Dragonstone would lay the foundation for their rise to power. They were now the last Dragon Lords, the only family to still possess the mighty creatures that had once ruled the skies over Valyria. Their dragons became their most valuable asset, a symbol of their power and a tool for their ambition. While the other houses of Westeros focused on their internal conflicts and power struggles, the Targaryens remained patient, biding their time on Dragonstone. They observed the political landscape of the Seven Kingdoms, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the years that followed, Dragonstone became more than just a seat of power. It became the launching point for the Targaryen legacy that would one day conquer Westeros. The Targaryens began to forge their own destiny, separate from the ruins of Valyria, and though they were few in number, they had something no one else had: dragons. They bred and trained their dragons, preparing them for the day when they would take to the skies and reclaim their dominance over the world. The move to Dragonstone also set the stage for the Targaryens' eventual conquest of Westeros. The island, strategically located off the coast of the continent, allowed them to observe the political landscape of the Seven Kingdoms. They watched as the great houses of Westeros fought amongst themselves, unaware that a new power was quietly growing just across the sea. The Targaryens saw the disunity and weakness of the Seven Kingdoms and realized that they could be easily conquered. The story of the Targaryens is one of survival, ambition, and fire. Their journey from Valyria to Dragonstone marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for their family, but for Westeros itself. What began as an act of survival would soon become a conquest that would change the course of history. And so the Targaryens waited on Dragonstone, their eyes ever watchful, their dragons ever ready, as they prepared for the day when they would take their place at the heart of Westeros. They were the Dragon Lords, the rightful rulers of the world, and they would not rest until they had claimed their destiny. In the annals of Westerosi history, there are few structures as infamous as Harrenhal. In 42 BC, Harrenhal, king of the Isles and the Rivers, embarked on an audacious project, one that would become both a testament to his ambition and ultimately his downfall. The construction of Harrenhal, the largest and most imposing castle ever built in Westeros, began as a symbol of power, invincibility, and dominance. But as with so many grand undertakings in this land of fire and ice, Harrenhal's legacy would be far more tragic than its creator could have ever imagined. It would become a monument to hubris and a reminder of the futility of earthly power in the face of greater forces. Harren, driven by his desire to cement his place in history, envisioned Harrenhal as a fortress that would stand forever, unmatched in both size and strength. Its towers were designed to rise so high they would kiss the clouds, and its walls were built to repel any army foolish enough to try and besiege it. He wanted a castle that would dwarf all others, a testament to his wealth, power, and ambition. Harren's vision was clear. Harrenhal would be the seat of his power, a fortress so grand that it would outshine every castle in the land. It would be his legacy, a symbol of his reign that would endure for centuries to come. The castle's sheer size and the resources required to build it stretched the wealth of the Riverlands to its limits. Vast amounts of timber, stone, and labor were poured into the construction, a project that would take decades to complete. The forests were stripped bare, the quarries were emptied, and the people of the Riverlands were forced to work tirelessly on the construction. As the years passed, the construction of Harrenhal consumed the reigns of multiple kings. What began under Harrenhal continued long after his death, with his descendants carrying on the monumental task. Each king added to the castle, making it even larger and more imposing than before. 40 years of labor, sacrifice, and ambition were poured into its walls. The castle grew taller, its towers more imposing, its halls large enough to hold entire armies. The workers toiled day and night, driven by the king's insatiable desire for grandeur. Harrenhal was designed to be impregnable, a fortress that no army could ever hope to breach. Its completion was meant to be the crowning achievement of the Hoare dynasty, a fortress that would stand eternal. But as the final stones were laid and Harrenhal's massive gates were sealed, a far greater force was already making its way toward the shores of Westeros. Aegon the Conqueror, with his dragons, had set his sights on the Seven Kingdoms. While Harren had focused on building walls to defend against men, he had not anticipated the arrival of a power unlike anything Westeros had seen before: dragons. He had ignored the prophecies, dismissed the rumors, and focused solely on building his impenetrable fortress. As Aegon's conquest unfolded, the might of his dragons proved unstoppable. No matter how high the walls or how thick the defenses, nothing could withstand the fiery wrath of Balerion the Black Dread, the largest and most fearsome of Aegon's dragons. The flames could melt stone, incinerate armies, and turn the mightiest fortresses into smoldering ruins. When Aegon's forces reached Harrenhal, King Harrenhal took refuge within his great fortress, confident that its immense size and strength would keep him safe. After all, no army had ever taken Harrenhal, and its walls were said to be impenetrable. He scoffed at the rumors of dragons, believing that his mighty castle could withstand any threat. But walls of stone were no match for dragon fire. Aegon unleashed Balerion's fury upon Harrenhal, and the castle that had taken 4 decades to build was reduced to a smoldering ruin in a matter of moments. The towers that once kissed the clouds melted under the intense heat, their stone walls collapsing in on themselves. King Harren and his entire line were wiped out, burned alive within the very castle that was meant to protect them. Their screams echoed through the halls as the dragonfire consumed them. Harrenhal, the grandest fortress ever built, had fallen. The destruction of Harrenhal wasn't the end of its story. In the years that followed, the castle became infamous not only for its size and its tragic fall, but for the curse that seemed to hang over it. After the Hoare dynasty perished, Harrenhal passed through the hands of many noble families, but none could hold it for long. Each family that claimed Harrenhal fell to ruin, as if the castle itself were cursed by the fiery death of its original builder. The mighty fortress, once a symbol of invincibility, became a place of misfortune and despair. The curse of Harrenhal, as it came to be known, haunted its halls, with each new occupant meeting a tragic end. The wealth and power promised by Harrenhal proved to be a mirage, leading only to death and destruction. The great walls that were meant to stand as a monument to the power of men became a reminder of the forces beyond their control. The castle served as a grim warning, a testament to the futility of earthly ambition in the face of fate. Harrenhal, once the most ambitious project in Westeros, now stands as a ruin, a symbol of hubris and the inevitability of fate. Its empty halls and shattered towers serve as a reminder that no matter how high men build, no matter how strong their walls, there are forces in the world, whether dragon or curse, that can bring even the mightiest of fortresses crashing down. Harrenhal's legacy endures, but not as its creator intended. The fractured kingdoms of Westeros had long been a land of rivalries, blood feuds, and shifting alliances, with each region vying for power and dominance over the others. But in 2 BC, a new force arrived from across the Narrow Sea, one that would forever change the political landscape of the continent. Aegon Targaryen, alongside his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys, launched an invasion that would see the 7 kingdoms united under a single rule, the rule of House Targaryen. The arrival of Aegon and his dragons was a watershed moment in Westerosi history, a turning point that would shape the future of the continent for centuries to come. This was no ordinary conquest, for Aegon had a weapon that none of the lords of Westeros could match: dragons. These magnificent creatures, once thought to be extinct, had returned to Westeros, and with them came the promise of fire and blood. Aegon's ambition was as vast as it was clear: to unite the fractured kingdoms of Westeros under one banner, to bring peace and stability to a land torn apart by centuries of conflict. He saw the potential for a unified Westeros, a realm where the people could live in peace and prosperity under the rule of a strong and just king. With his 3 dragons, Balerion, Vahagar, and Meraxes, Aegon knew that he had the power to reshape the continent. They were his greatest weapon, a symbol of his power, and the key to his success. The great lords of Westeros had their castles and their armies, but Aegon had fire. They relied on steel and strategy, but Aegon had the raw power of dragons. They underestimated the threat he posed, believing that they could resist his invasion. The conquest began with a series of swift and brutal campaigns. Aegon's forces landed on the eastern shores of Westeros, where he quickly established a foothold. His armies, bolstered by the power of his dragons, swept through the land, taking castle after castle, city after city. But it wasn't just Aegon's military prowess that secured his victories. It was the sheer terror of the dragons. creatures that could burn entire armies in a matter of moments. The sight of Balerion the Black Dread soaring through the sky, his massive wings blotting out the sun, struck fear into the hearts of even the bravest warriors. The dragons were a force of nature, unstoppable and terrifying. One of the most decisive moments of Aegon's conquest came at Harrenhal, the largest and most formidable castle in Westeros. Harrenhal, who had believed his fortress to be impenetrable, met his end when Aegon's dragon, Balerion, reduced Harrenhal to a smoldering ruin. The walls that had taken decades to build melted under dragon fire, and Harren and his entire line were wiped out in an instant. This was the power Aegon wielded,